Welcome to the deep dive.
Mhm.
Our mission here is to take a dense stack of sources, articles, investigative notes, and critical research and just really pull out the core knowledge you need to be thoroughly informed.
And today, we are diving into a study of stark contrasts. I mean, it's a classic New York story.
Right. You have, on one hand, the romantic, almost human scale feel of old Greenwich Village, with its winding cobblestone streets.
The ones that completely defied that rigid Euclidean 1811 street grid.
Exactly. They proudly defied it for centuries, and then you set that against the instantaneous, brutal, and totally anonymous reality of death on a subway track.
It's a chilling contrast.
Yeah.
And our sources document this really baffling series of tragedies that law enforcement at first just dismissed.
As suicides.
Simple individual acts of suicide. So our job in this deep dive is to trace the painstaking paths that Detective Quinn and his team took. We're going to track how he connected these seemingly accidental deaths and the very modern complexities of online dating to uncover a serial killer.
A highly controlled one.
Oh, incredibly controlled. And the motive wasn't random malice. It was rooted in this profoundly disturbing psychological profile that investigators call the right woman syndrome.
So the story really begins with a shock right on the edge of the village on a cold, pale November morning.
And the air, it had that particular November bite to it. You know, it feels like it's stealing the warmth right out of your bones.
That's the scene of the first death, a 27-year-old woman named Valerie Latham. She was a regular at a beloved local spot, the Village Blend Coffee House.
And she was pushed onto the uptown Broadway line tracks near Union Square.
And the specifics of her final moments, that's what immediately starts to unravel the whole suicide theory.
Absolutely. Valerie was young, she was thriving in her career, and crucially, she was in the middle of the most mundane, hopeful, everyday routine.
She was holding a bag of farmer's market produce in one hand.
Implying dinner plans, right, life plans.
Yeah.
And in the other hand, she had a double tall cup of coffee from the Village Blend.
A double tall latte, to be specific. And our sources really linger on this point. It's not just a drink. It's, a signature of an American routine.
It's comfort, it's energy, it's a commitment to the day ahead.
So the question Quinn must have been asking is, who buys groceries and their favorite coffee, and then 10 minutes later decides to end their life?
That cognitive dissonance is the first strongest clue that something much darker was at play here. It suggests projection, violence, not depression.
Okay, let's unpack this geography. Why did this particular location, this coffee house, become the absolute ground zero for the whole investigation?
The central nexus, the anchor point for all these stories, is the Village Blend. And you have to understand, this isn't some chain or a modern glass box cafe.
No, it's an archetypal federal-style townhouse on Hudson Street, a 4-story corner building.
A building that's housed this coffee business for nearly 2 centuries. And above the Blend, there's this stunning, historic duplex apartment. We're talking antique furnishings, working fireplaces, and it's all managed by the host of this little community, Clare Cosi.
And that setting is so essential because in a massive, often isolating city like New York, the Blend is where community happens. It's like a public living room.
It is. Our sources paint this really rich picture of the daily chatter. Customers talking about the absurdity of Broadway ticket prices.
The impossibility of finding decent rent.
Or, just the comforting predictability of local cable news, specifically Channel 1 with the anchor Pat Kiernan. It's a place where faces are familiar, routine is predictable, and people feel connected.
Even if those connections are sometimes, a bit superficial.
Exactly. And that facade of community, that's what the killer used. That's what they leveraged.
So initially, Valerie Latham's death ruled a suicide.
A simple suicide. No note, no prior indicators, nothing in her history to flag any kind of mental instability. Detective Quinn and his partner, they were only assigned to provide what they called transit brethren assistance.
Which is basically just.
Basic support.
Yeah.
A routine apartment search because Valerie was a village resident. That's it.
But Quinn, being the seasoned detective the sources portray him as, he immediately sensed that something was off. The whole thing felt mechanically unlikely.
Right, so he focused on the specific physical evidence at the scene. First thing was the motorman's report.
What was unusual about it?
The driver claimed Valerie flew right out in front of the train. And that language, flew right out, it strongly suggests lateral projection, a force from the side.
So a push, not someone just falling or stepping off the platform edge.
Exactly. And then there's the logic problem we keep coming back to. The groceries. A heavy bag of produce she bought just moments before.
But Quinn also realized the physical geography of that specific platform was, in a way, the killer's silent accomplice?
Yes. This particular station, near Union Square, it has a slight curve in the track. Valerie had been waiting for the Uptown R train behind the staircase on the platform's south end.
And that staircase created a perfect visual block, a blind spot.
Blind spot that shielded the pusher from the few other riders who were standing further down the platform.
So this detail, the blind spot, it completely transforms the crime. It's not a random tragedy anymore. It's a perfectly calculated act.
Perfectly. The deafening noise of the approaching train provided sonic cover. The pusher could just snake around the edge of that staircase, deliver one single perfectly timed push, and then
Vanish. Just vanish into the crowd without ever being seen. The sheer calculated coolness of it is just chilling.
And we know exactly how calculated it was because of a fascinating choice in the source material. We get the killer's point of view. They refer to themselves only as the genius in their private thoughts.
Then they recount the whole thing.
They do. They note that Valerie was leaning slightly forward, innocently peeking around these dull green support beams, watching the train come in. She was encumbered. Coffee in one hand, heavy produce in the other.
No hand free to fight back, no way to regain her balance.
None. The genius describes listening to the mechanical junk rumble of the R train, executing that simple single push, and then immediately walking away.
And the thought that follows is just horrifying.
Objective achieved, and time for that cappuccino. It speaks to a profound detachment, a normalization of violence into just another task on the to-do list.
But before Quinn could officially get Valerie's case reclassified from suicide to homicide, the second death occurred.
Right. Inga Berg, she plunged from the rooftop of her new condo building, also in the village.
And this happened the very same evening Quinn was meeting with Clare Cosi, right? For a non-work thing.
A non-work thing. He was trying to discuss the decay of his own marriage, so the timing was just tragic, and it completely distracted his initial focus on Valerie's case.
And as soon as the news of this second death spreads through the village blend, the customers, they start speculating wildly.
Which is such a perfect reflection of how the media and the public handle these clusters of seemingly random deaths. One regular, Esther, she suggests there's an epidemic of suicides in the air, a general malaise gripping the city.
But another regular, Kira, she raises a much more insightful, almost literary angle.
She brings up Goofy's The Sorrows of Young Werther. And for listeners who aren't familiar, Werther was this 18th century novel where the protagonist commits suicide. After it was published, there was an actual documented spate of copycat suicides across Europe.
So Kira's point is that suicide can become this perverse kind of cultural fad.
Fueled by media coverage and public fascination. It's a brilliant comparison. It shows how the media narrative, often reinforced by local news figures like Pat Kiernan on Channel 1, can shape public perception. It makes it easier for everyone, including law enforcement, to just settle on the easy answer.
Suicide. The focus shifts from a criminal investigation to some kind of existential angst in the city.
And the police were definitely leaning toward that easy answer again. Inga was, like Valerie, young, attractive, outwardly successful. But Quinn just saw patterns. He refused the coincidence and forced the investigation deeper.
Deeper into the one commonality they shared, beyond just being in the village.
Their social lives.
Which brings us to the dating connection.
That's the common thread. And both were actively using online dating services. Specifically, a site called singlesnyc.com.
This is such a crucial pivot. It grounds the investigation not in some isolated madness, but in the specific and often brutal realities of dating in a huge city like New York.
And our sources give us some key demographic statistics that really illustrate the pressure here. In the 35 to 44 age group, you have approximately 400,000 single women.
Okay.
Versus only 300,000 traditionally married women.
Wow. That's a massive imbalance, a 25% surplus of single women, all competing for a limited pool of men.
Precisely. And this demographic reality, as our sources explain it, it breeds a culture known as shop and drop, particularly among men.
Shop and drop.
They feel empowered to just rapidly cycle through partners. They move from one connection to the next with minimal emotional investment because the supply, well, it's constantly replenishing.
And this cultural dynamic sets the stage for the killer's psychological profile, which is so rooted in this idea of proprietary ownership.
And the village blend itself, trying to capitalize on this, universal desire for connection, hosted an event called the Cappuccino Connection.
A singles event.
A singles event that brought the victims and the suspects all into the same room.
And the atmosphere there sounds just intensely cynical.
Oh, it was. Claire, who's watching the whole thing unfold, she starts categorizing the men in her notepad just to cope with how shallow the interactions are.
She created archetypes.
She did. Mr. Slick, Mr. Jock, Mr. Movie Phone, Mr. Mama's Boy, and maybe most tragically, Mr. Borderline clinically depressed.
That's fantastic. It's like a social shorthand that perfectly reflects that pressure cooker environment of New York City dating.
And this concentration of archetypes at the connection, it directly links the location to the killer's hunting ground. It narrows the potential pool of suspects down from, the entire city to just a handful of known faces.
It provides the killer with a centralized, predictable environment.
And it is at this very event that Clare Cosi meets the man who becomes the initial, overwhelming focus of Detective Quinn's investigation. The primary suspect in all 3 deaths that would follow.
The man Claire met and labeled, with a certain amount of, optimistic cynicism,
That's right.
was Bruce Bowman, and our sources detail his immediate appeal. He's a wealthy, successful architect specializing in historical restoration.
A perfect fit for the village aesthetic. He even owned his own piece of history, an archetypal 1830 federal townhouse on Leroy Street.
So he projected success, charm, refinement.
Totally. He was genuinely enthusiastic about the nuances of coffee. He shared Claire's deep appreciation for classic art, specifically those moody, introspective George Hopper paintings. He was, to all outward appearances, the perfect catch.
But Detective Quinn was getting confidential information that just started to shred that polished exterior.
Right. Quinn's team established these undeniable direct links between Bruce and both Valerie and Inga.
He had dated Valerie Latham for 3 weeks.
Met her through her job at a high-level executive travel agency, which again just reinforces Bruce's professional standing and his wealth.
And his connection to the second victim, Ingeborg, was even more immediate and purely transactional.
Right. Bruce admits to Claire that he'd had a brief, strictly sexual relationship with Inga. It began in late October and just abruptly ended right before her death in early November.
So this establishes a clear pattern. Bruce is the nexus point linking the women who died.
He's the link.
Uh-huh.
But correlation doesn't equal causation, so Quinn needed physical evidence. And the investigation into Ingeborg's death delivered something absolutely crucial.
What did they find?
Quinn's team discovered a ripped-up note. It was addressed to Inga, and they found it in a garbage can on the rooftop.
The same rooftop she fell from.
The same one. And they could date its presence because the building's maintenance crew had emptied all the older garbage earlier that day. So this piece of paper was placed there the night of the murder.
And the note was just signed with the letter B.
B for Bruce. And if you look closely at the content of that note, it just screams premeditation.
It was an invitation.
An invitation to meet someone by her car on the rooftop parking lot for a special surprise. And this tied directly into this disturbing piece of intelligence they got from another tenant.
The tenant who had seen her.
A few days earlier, a tenant had observed Inga satisfying what was described as a particularly interesting kink, having sex in her new SUV right there on the rooftop parking lot.
So Quinn quickly deduced that the killer lured Inga to the roof by exploiting this specific private detail.
Promising an implied sexual encounter related to her kink. But instead, she met her death from a 15-story fall.
The crucial analytical leap here is the risk the killer took. They brought the note, committed the crime, and then just hastily ripped it up and threw away right there.
Assuming the police would just rule it a suicide and never conduct the kind of meticulous search that would locate the fragments.
That risk calculation, that arrogance, it's a massive clue to the killer's pathology. But the situation escalates dramatically before Quinn can even act on his suspicions about Bruce.
The third homicide. Sahara McNeil.
Sahara was an old college friend of Bruce's, a legitimate art dealer, and critically, she was the third woman linked to him.
She left the Cappuccino Connection event with him the previous Saturday night. Her death was reported shortly after.
And this was the case that finally broke that illusion of suicide.
Completely. It was initially reported as a simple fall, an accident under a sanitation truck near West 10th Street. It was reckless, sloppy, happened in broad daylight. A stark contrast to that calculated subway push.
But the police quickly confirmed it was a homicide.
Based on undeniable witness testimony. One witness, an assistant manager at a nearby bar, confirmed hearing a woman scream the word no just moments before she fell.
And a second witness.
A second witness heard someone running quickly on the sidewalk right after. The pattern was now undeniable, and the recklessness suggested the killer was losing control.
So Quinn connects the dots. Bruce Bowman is now linked to 3 suspicious deaths in rapid succession. Valerie, Inga, and now Sahara.
And he tells Claire in no uncertain terms, that 3 deaths is never a coincidence in his line of work. And if his theory is correct, the killer is unraveling and the violence is only going to escalate.
Meanwhile, Claire is deeply emotionally invested in Bruce. He's this charming architect who represents her own hopes for a new relationship.
And she refuses to accept that he could be a sociopath. So she makes the incredibly dangerous decision to conduct her own unauthorized investigation, using her relationship with him to get inside.
She spends the night at his beautifully restored federal townhouse. This is a massive risk, a civilian actively snooping on a prime suspect.
But she gets results through technology. She finds his laptop. It was in sleep mode, but the password was automatically logged in. It gave her full access.
But the first, and maybe the most critical piece of evidence she finds, is physical. It's sitting right there on his desk.
A computer printer. And the specific detail here is vital. It was a Hewlett-Packard DeskJet model 840C.
Why is that model so important?
Because Quinn had been exhaustively trying to link that exact model, which is a bit dated but still popular, to the ink and type fragments they found on the ripped-up note that was left for Ingeborg.
Right, because printers leave micromarks, these little imperfections that act like a forensic fingerprint.
Exactly. So finding the exact model Quinn was searching for, sitting on the desk of the prime suspect, it's practically a confession. It connects Bruce directly to the planning of Inga's murder.
Claire immediately recognizes the gravity of this. She then dives into his laptop, searching his old mailbox for any correspondence with the victims.
And while she doesn't find a literal smoking gun, a confession, the accumulation of evidence, the dating history, the printer, it's damning.
But this evidence, coupled with her growing fear, it forces her to widen her search. She starts considering that Quinn might be wrong about Bruce.
She and her ex-husband, Matteo, they start pursuing what turn out to be major red herrings, all in an effort to clear Bruce's name and really to save her own emotional investment.
And this decision by Claire and Matteo to launch their own private investigation, it just shows the depth of her denial.
She was looking for anyone, absolutely anyone else, to be the killer, and their first target was this guy named Seth Martin Todd, a deeply unsettling painter who preferred to be called Mars.
Mars was intense, almost pathologically so. At the Cappuccino Connection, he was heavily focused on Sahara McNeil.
What made him so suspicious was this bizarre boast he made that he had already made his connection for the night after only speaking to Sahara and Claire's daughter, Joy. It just suggested this predatory confidence, or maybe a pre-existing plan.
And their suspicion was fueled by his professional life. He sold his dark, violent art through Sahara's gallery.
And the gallery owner, known only as Torquemada, confirmed Mars's obsession with Sahara. He referred to him chillingly as a lapdog to its master, but also warned that Mars was quick to threaten anyone who crossed him.
So Claire and Matteo track him to his studio in Long Island City, and the location itself just adds to the whole sinister mood.
It's an industrial area, and his business name, Todd Studios, uses the German word Tod, which means death.
So the speculation was high. Mars, an artist obsessed with destruction and violent art, could have killed Sahara, especially given his own violent history.
He had previously been accused of murdering his wife. The charges were dropped on a legal technicality, but still.
The physical environment, his personality, it's all very compelling. But this is where their investigation just hits a cold, hard wall.
Right. Mars, who was initially so unsettling, boasting about destroying the things he loves, he produces a verifiable, airtight alibi.
A live television interview.
A live cable access TV interview on a show called Metro NY Arts during the precise time window of Sahara McNeil's death.
You can't fake that. It's the classic perfect alibi. The relief for Claire is momentary, though, because she immediately has to shift her focus to the second major red herring, Brooks Newman.
Brooks was the man Claire had met on her very first singles NYC date. He was a freeloader, a creep, and the physical embodiment to that shop-and-drop culture we talked about.
He was managing some kind of vegan benefit event.
A Meat No More, or benefit. And in this bizarre juxtaposition of ethical concern and crass commercialism, it involved a lingerie model fundraiser at the historic Puck Building.
Brooks was exactly what Claire had predicted. A serial dater who collected numbers but never invested in anyone.
He confirmed he took numbers from a lot of women at the connection, including a friend of Joy's. Claire even used his dating profile as a template for what to avoid, the ultimate shop-and-drop guy.
So Claire and Matt track him down at the Puck Building, mainly because Joy was catering the event and was therefore in close proximity to this known predator.
And Claire needed to confirm Brooks was just a creep, not a killer, to further clear Bruce's name in her own mind.
This part of the investigation really highlights Claire's dangerous amateur status, though. She was so desperate to prove Bruce innocent that she just walked right into a dangerous situation.
Totally. Brooks Newman, drunk on vodka and exhibiting classic predatory behavior, he corners Claire in a service hallway.
And the confrontation escalates quickly. He makes this obnoxious sexual pass, tears her flimsy Victoria's Secret nightgown.
It's a really powerful moment. It shows her error in judgment. She was looking for some grand serial killer motive, and instead she just found this everyday, localized sexual violence.
Thankfully, Quinn arrived moments later. Mateo had tipped him off, sensing the danger.
And Brooks Newman was immediately arrested for sexual assault against Claire.
And that arrest, though it's a relief, it forces this hard, necessary stop to Claire's attempts to play detective. And it's right after this that Quinn finally drops the true, shocking key to the entire case.
He reveals he had been chasing the wrong Bowman all along.
The killer wasn't Bruce.
The killer was Bruce's ex-wife, Maxine Bowman. And the pattern didn't start in New York. It started up in Westchester County.
So Bruce's marriage to Maxine had ended. Why?
Not because of his infidelity, but due to Maxine's own affairs with both men and women. The divorce, however, was vicious and possessive, entirely on her part.
And the first victim, the one the police up there ruled a suicide,
Was an intern at Bruce's architecture office who had started dating him. Maxine began this intense campaign of harassment and stalking against this young woman.
and when the intern fell to her death from the rooftop of Bruce's building, Maxine's lawyers.
Quickly supplied an alibi. But Quinn, looking back at it now, was certain Maxine had pushed her. That's when the cycle of murder began.
And Maxine had since relocated to New York City and was operating under an alias.
Winnie Winslet. This is the very woman Claire had met at the Blend. The seemingly harmless, wealthy, shearling lady. Quinn's realization was profound. He wasn't looking for a husband who killed his lovers. He was looking for the ex-wife who was killing his potential new property owners.
And Maxine herself initiates the final, terrifying confrontation.
She orchestrates this precise lure. She purposefully leaves her laptop bag at the Blend after hours, knowing Claire would be the one to find it and, well, investigate.
And when Claire opens the laptop,
She finds the email backup folders, Vintage 86 Cent, and Maxine's incoming. The confirmation of her true identity is instantaneous.
the confrontation takes place on the roof of that historic 4-story townhouse above the Blend.
And Maxine, caught and just furious, forces Claire toward the sheer edge of the drop. And in this climactic moment, she reveals everything. Her knowledge of all the murders, and in a moment of extreme pathological arrogance, she calls the police idiots for missing all the obvious clues she left.
Her rage is so terrifyingly focused, it's proprietary. She screams at Claire, calling her Joy's coat.
A deeply dehumanizing way to refer to her, simply because Claire had spent the night with Bruce. Her sense of ownership extended even to the physical items associated with Bruce's new life.
There's this memorable detail of Claire's resistance.
A moment of hope. She had a packed snowball in her pocket from a walk earlier, and she throws it right into Maxine's perfectly maintained, plastic surgery-enhanced face.
That shock gives her a split second of an advantage.
But Maxine is desperate and armed. She screams, "I'll kill her! I'll shoot her, Bruce!"
And Bruce, who had followed Claire upstairs after finding the Blend's door unlocked, arrives just in time.
The situation is instantly resolved in tragedy. Bruce body slams Maxine to save Claire, and the momentum carries both of them just a few feet beyond the edge of the roof.
They fall 4 stories to the concrete below.
Found later in what the sources describe as a terrible, twisted embrace. Maxine died instantly. Bruce was rushed to St. Vincent's, where he regained consciousness just long enough, despite massive internal injuries, to ask if Claire was okay before they lost him.
A tragically heroic end for a man whose mind had been warped by another's violent proprietary control.
It's the ultimate confirmation. Bruce wasn't the killer. He was, perhaps, the intended prize in this terrifying psychological war.
So the entire focus now shifts to understanding the pathology that drove Maxine to commit 4 calculated and increasingly sloppy murders.
Right. And following the investigation's violent conclusion, Detective Quinn delivered his final critical analysis of Maxine Bowman. This provides the framework for all of her actions. She was the textbook definition of the right woman syndrome.
What's so unsettling is that deep, fundamental contrast between her outward success and her internal fragility.
Exactly. She was brilliant. She was rich. She had high-powered jobs. She was capable of hiring elite defense lawyers and maintaining this perfect public facade of charm and control. But underneath it all, She harbored these crippling insecurities.
And Quinn traced these insecurities back to two primary sources.
The first was chronic demeaning comments from her father throughout her childhood. The second was a series of professional failures, specifically being fired from several high-profile law firms. These experiences convinced her that she was, fundamentally, a failure.
And this is where that pathology of ownership and control really takes root.
To compensate for her deep-seated sense of inferiority, Maxine viewed Bruce not as an equal partner, but as a critical piece of property, something she owned, managed, and financially engineered.
She literally paid for his education.
Paid for his education, helped him build his successful architecture business over 10 years, which she venomously referred to as her sweat equity investment.
So her self-worth became completely tied to the successful output of her investment. Bruce's career, his social standing.
If Bruce was successful, she was successful. Her father and her former employers were wrong about her.
That concept, sweat equity, is just fascinating and chilling when you apply it to a person. It means that losing Bruce wasn't just losing a husband. It was the total liquidation and loss of a decade-long financial and emotional investment.
That's it. Quinn notes that people afflicted with the right man or woman syndrome, they frequently seek out submissive, admiring mates. And it's precisely because those partners provide the constant, absolute validation they need to mask their own deep sense of inadequacy.
So Bruce, who looked up to Maxine for years, was her ultimate source of reassurance that she was not a failure. He was her controlled environment.
And that brings us directly to the core definition of the syndrome, which is the crucial insight for this whole deep dive. The right man or woman maintains complete control and charm with the entire outside world,
Flawlessly navigating social and professional spheres.
with everyone except their one specific intimate partner.
That is the defining feature, the conscious choice to permit destruction.
Yes. To function in the outside world, to hire lawyers, to run her career, to appear as Winnie Winslet. Maxine maintained absolute self-control. But toward Bruce, her intimate partner, her property, she permitted herself to use him as an escape valve. She could explode at will, venting rage, even violence, knowing he would remain under her control.
So when Bruce finally made the decision to leave, that escape valve was wrenched away.
The rage couldn't be vented internally anymore. It was immediately and violently transferred onto any external woman who dared to try and own what she perceived as her intellectual and financial creation.
Valerie, Inga, and Sahara. They weren't just romantic rivals, they were seen as predatory threats.
Threats attempting to benefit from Bruce's newly built market value. Value she felt belonged exclusively to her, the original investor. The murders were acts of psychological repossession.
The journal evidence found on Maxine's laptop just confirms this terrifying pathology.
Her entries were these rambling, arrogant rants focused entirely on Bruce's decision to divorce. After the first murder of the intern, which the idiot police, in her words, ruled a suicide, she saw that successful deception as proof.
Proof that she was a genius, that she was smarter than law enforcement.
And this soaring arrogance is what fueled the increasingly reckless homicides. The calculated subway push was followed by the less controlled rooftop plunge, and then finally, that utterly sloppy, broad daylight push under a sanitation truck.
So that escalation, fueled by her delusion of intellectual superiority, is ultimately what gave Quinn the definitive evidence he needed to confirm the serial murders.
The desire to prove her genius outweighed the need for perfect control.
The entire cycle of violence was just fueled by her self-perception of entitlement and her pathological need to maintain absolute ownership over the one person who could validate her fragile existence.
It forces you to look beyond the surface of success. Maxine Bowman wasn't failing in her career because she was incompetent. She was failing because she couldn't tolerate anyone else's authority or presence in her space. And when she found a person, Bruce, who she could completely control, that control became her entire identity.
So when he left, she had to destroy the physical evidence of his independence.
And the tragic irony is that Bruce, in seeking his own independence, ultimately became the final victim in her proprietary war. Though he did redeem himself through that ultimate act of self-sacrifice to protect Claire.
This deep dive really reveals the intricate way that community dynamics, the cutthroat nature of New York's dating culture.
Amplified by systems like Singles NYC and events like the Cappuccino Connection.
And these seemingly insignificant forensic items all converged. A specific, older model of printer, a hastily ripped-up note signed with a B, even the misidentification of a yellow parka.
Which was a detail that contributed to Maxine's paranoia about property. These were the critical threads, and they led to the unraveling of a profoundly volatile psychological breakdown that claimed 4 lives, including the perpetrator and her intended prize.
The most striking and maybe the most disturbing takeaway from Quinn's final analysis is the nature of choice in this right woman syndrome.
This was not a random, uncontrollable psychotic break. It was a conscious decision by Maxine to deploy destructive behavior toward her intimate partner and anyone who threatened her proprietary claim over him.
All while she maintained a facade of perfect control and charm for the rest of the world. That internal emotional baggage was just methodically weaponized.
It completely reframes how you think about self-control. It reminds us that for someone like Maxine, true failure wasn't a career collapse. It was the loss of that proprietary control, the validation she got from managing her personal asset. Her brilliance wasn't used for success, but for meticulous, targeted destruction.
This raises an important and I think a provocative final thought for you to consider. If profound destructive rage is simply a conscious choice reserved for one specific relationship, if the ability to be charming and successful masks this deep proprietary sickness, how well do we truly know the most polished people we invite into our lives?
Especially those who struggle most desperately with the simple concept of letting go.
And what happens when the very object they rely on for psychological validation tries to finally escape their grasp and realize their own value?
The hidden truth of this case is that the mask of functional brilliance can be maintained right up until the point where the victim becomes a threat to the killer's self-perception. And that moment of perceived threat is what triggers the weaponization of emotional property rights, with fatal consequences.
That's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.